The dim lights of the auction hall cast long shadows across the floor. Lyra shivered inside her glass containment tank, her pale blue skin glistening with the moisture she needed to survive. Her translucent fins trembled as rough hands pushed her transport cube onto the stage. She had been away from water too long, and her breathing grew labored. Next item. A female Satyrian, rare specimen from the water world Aqualis, announced the auctioneer, a four-armed Phyrexian with scales that shimmered under the spotlights. Satyrians are known for their empathic abilities and underwater navigation skills. Starting bid at 50,000 credits. Lyra looked out at the crowd of alien faces. Some leered, others calculated her worth with cold eyes. 3 weeks ago, she had been studying ancient coral formations in her home ocean when the raiders came. Now she was property, displayed like exotic seafood at a market. In the back of the room stood Elijah Harper, his human features partially hidden under a hooded cloak. He blended in among the various species by hunching his shoulders and adopting the swagger of a mid-level criminal. His hand rested near the concealed blaster at his hip, a nervous habit from his years in Earth's special forces. This was supposed to be intelligence gathering only. He muttered to himself, watching Lyra's frightened eyes dart around the room. His mission was clear: document the black market operations, identify key players, and report back to Earth Command. Buying a slave wasn't part of the plan. The bidding began. A tusked Hrovian merchant raised a tentacle. 55,000. A reptilian trader countered. 60,000. Elijah recognized the reptilian. Drask, notorious for selling exotic pets to the wealthy. The creatures rarely survived a month in his care. Elijah's jaw tightened. 70,000, called a voice from the shadows. A Xandoran pleasure house operator, whose reputation made Elijah's stomach turn. Lyra could sense the emotions radiating from the bidders. Greed, cruelty, lust. She pressed her webbed hands against the glass, trying to find any compassionate face in the crowd. I'm gathering intelligence, not interfering, Elijah reminded himself, but his eyes kept returning to the tank. The Satyrian was clearly struggling to breathe. The auction house hadn't bothered with proper life support systems. If Drask or the Xandoran won, she wouldn't last long. 100,000 credits, called Drask with a hiss of triumph. The auctioneer's eyes lit up. 100,000 from our esteemed client. Do I hear? 150,000. Elijah called out, his voice carrying across the room. Several heads turned in surprise at the human's bid. The auctioneer blinked his 3 eyes rapidly. 150,000 from the human in the back. Do I hear 160? Drask turned, his yellow eyes narrowing at Elijah. 160,000. He spat. Elijah stepped forward, letting his cloak fall open enough to reveal expensive-looking clothes and a belt of rare metals, all props from Earth intelligence. 250,000, he said with the casual arrogance of someone with money to burn. A murmur ran through the crowd. Drask's tail lashed in anger, but he remained silent. 250,000 going once. Twice. Sold to the human. The auctioneer slammed down a glowing rod. Collection and payment at the back. Lyra's eyes found Elijah's across the room. She sensed something different about him. His emotions weren't like the others. There was determination, caution, and something else. Compassion. She couldn't be sure. Either way, her fate was now tied to this strange human from a planet she'd only heard stories about. At the payment station, Elijah transferred the credits, untraceable funds provided by Earth intelligence for emergencies. The Phyrexian clerk looked skeptical. First time at our establishment. Unusual for humans to come this far into the outer rim. Elijah shrugged. Earth is getting crowded. Looking to expand my collection with something special. The Satyrian requires water every 6 hours and special minerals. Without them, the clerk made a slicing motion across his throat. I've done my research, Elijah said coldly. 2 guards brought Lyra's tank forward. Up close, he could see her more clearly. humanoid from the waist up with elegant fins extending from her arms and back. Her large, expressive eyes watched him warily. "She understands most common languages, but can't speak them," the clerk said. "Satyrians communicate through light patterns and underwater sounds." Elijah nodded and tapped commands into a control pad, transferring ownership of the containment unit to himself. The tank hummed as it disconnected from the auction house systems. "My ship is docked in Bay 16, he said. As they moved through the crowded corridors, Elijah kept his hand near his weapon. Several other buyers watched them pass with envious or calculating looks. Lyra curled herself into a corner of the tank, as far from him as possible. Once aboard his small ship, Elijah secured the tank and quickly started the launch sequence. Only when they cleared the space station's gravity field did he finally turn to address Lyra. "I'm not what you think," he said, meeting her eyes. "My name is Captain Elijah Harper, Earth Intelligence. I'm going to get you home." Lyra's fins flared in surprise. She didn't fully trust him, but her empathic senses detected no deception. Elijah moved to a storage compartment and returned with a device that he attached to her tank. Fresh, mineral-rich water began to flow in. "This should help you breathe better," he said, watching as she cautiously extended her hands into the fresh current. "I need to maintain my cover until we're clear of this sector. After that, we can figure out how to get you back to Aqualis." A warning light flashed on his console. "We've got company. Patrol ship coming in fast, probably checking all vessels leaving the auction." He slid into the pilot's seat. "Hold on. This might get rough." Lyra braced herself against the sides of the tank as the ship accelerated sharply. For the first time since her capture, she felt a small flicker of hope. Whatever this human's true intentions, she was no longer at the auction block. For now, that would have to be enough. The patrol ship fell behind as Elijah pushed his vessel to maximum speed. Once they were safely away, he set the autopilot and turned his attention back to Lyra. Her tank was too small for comfort, barely allowing her to stretch her limbs. "We need to get you into something better," he said, running his hand through his short brown hair. "There's a hydration chamber in the cargo hold. It's not designed for your species, but it's bigger than this tank." Lyra watched him cautiously. Her large eyes, deep purple with flecks of silver, followed his movements. She could sense his genuine concern, but years of propaganda about humans made trust difficult. On her world, humans were portrayed as violent newcomers to galactic society, reckless and dangerous. Elijah carefully wheeled her tank through the narrow corridor to the cargo hold. The hydration chamber was originally designed for transporting aquatic specimens for scientific research, one of his many cover stories. He activated it, filling the glass enclosure with filtered water. "The mineral balance isn't perfect, but it's the best I can do for now," he explained, checking the readouts. "I need to open your tank to transfer you. I promise I won't hurt you." Lyra hesitated, then nodded slowly. As the tank opened, she tensed, but Elijah's movements were gentle as he helped her into the larger chamber. Her skin, a pale blue with iridescent patterns that shifted with her emotions, briefly glowed with alarm at his touch. Once inside the chamber, she stretched her fins for the first time in days. The relief was immediate. She sank to the bottom, letting her gills open fully to absorb the oxygen-rich water. Elijah sat cross-legged on the floor beside the chamber. "I know you understand me, even if you can't speak my language. I'm part of an Earth operation investigating interstellar trafficking. I wasn't supposed to intervene, just gather intelligence, but," he shrugged, "I couldn't leave you there." Lyra swam to the glass wall separating them. Her skin rippled with patterns of light, blues and greens flowing across her body in complex waves. Elijah didn't understand, but he recognized it as communication. "I don't know how to read your light patterns," he admitted, "but maybe we can figure out a simple system. 1 flash for yes, 2 for no." Lyra's skin pulsed once with bright blue light. "Good. Are you feeling better in this water?" 1 flash. Do you know how far we are from your home world? Two flashes, followed by a complex pattern he couldn't interpret. I need to contact my superiors, but not yet. Those traffickers have connections everywhere. We need to lay low for a while. Elijah checked the navigation system. We're heading toward the Cressida Nebula. It's uncharted territory, but the radiation should mask our signature. A warning alarm blared through the ship. Elijah jumped to his feet and raced to the cockpit. Lyra's skin flashed rapidly with concern. Another patrol, he called back to her. Bigger this time. They must have realized you're gone. The ship shuddered as a scanner beam swept over them. Elijah's hands flew across the controls, cutting main power and switching to emergency systems. They've spotted us, he muttered. We can't outrun them. He rushed back to the cargo hold. Lyra, I have an idea, but I need your help. The nebula ahead. Can your people navigate through radiation fields? Her skin pulsed once for yes. If I get close enough to the nebula, could you guide us through it? They wouldn't dare follow. Another single pulse, but fainter, hesitant. Elijah understood her reluctance. I know you don't trust me. You have no reason to. But right now, we need each other. The ship rocked violently as the first warning shot passed close to their hull. Elijah was thrown against the wall. When he touched his forehead, his fingers came away bloody. Lyra's eyes widened. Her people's empathic abilities let her feel his pain and determination. After a moment of consideration, her skin flashed once, decisively. Thank you, Elijah said, wiping away the blood. I'll need to get you closer to the controls. He quickly drained half the water from her chamber and wheeled it into the cockpit. The patrol ship loomed large in their view screen, a menacing shape against the stars. Final warning, unidentified vessel, came a harsh voice over the comm. Power down or be destroyed. Elijah ignored the command and accelerated toward the nebula's swirling clouds. I need you to guide me through the safe passages, he told Lyra. Can you indicate directions with your light patterns? Left, right, up, down. Lyra placed her webbed hands against the glass, her skin glowing with a new pattern. Directional indicators. As they entered the nebula's outer layers, radiation alarms screamed through the ship. The patrol vessel held back, unwilling to follow. It's working, Elijah exclaimed. The nebula enveloped them in swirling colors, blues, purples, and greens that reminded Lyra of home. She focused intently, her natural ability to sense currents and energies, allowing her to find safe passages through the cosmic storm. Her skin flashed guidance, and Elijah followed, trusting her completely despite having just met her. Through the heart of the nebula they flew, radiation battering the ship's shields but never quite breaking through. Lyra's directions grew more urgent as they navigated a particularly dense cluster of energy. I see it, Elijah assured her, making the sharp turn to avoid a lethal radiation pocket. After 20 tense minutes, they emerged on the far side of the nebula. The patrol ship was nowhere to be seen. Elijah slumped in his chair, exhaustion overtaking him. You saved us, he said simply. Lyra's skin glowed with a gentle blue pulse. For the first time, she allowed herself a small measure of trust in this human. Perhaps the stories she'd heard weren't entirely accurate. Elijah refilled her chamber with fresh water. We make a good team, he said with a tired smile. I think we just might survive this. As the ship drifted into the shadow of an uncharted moon, Lyra watched Elijah tend to his wound. She realized something unexpected. She was no longer merely a captive being rescued. They were allies now, dependent on each other's strengths. An uneasy alliance, perhaps, but an alliance nonetheless. 3 days passed in relative calm as they drifted at the edges of the nebula. Elijah used the time to repair damage to the ship's systems, while Lyra recovered her strength. They developed a simple communication system. Lyra used patterns of light to convey basic needs and directions, while Elijah taught her hand signals he'd learned in Earth's military. The ship's console suddenly lit up with warning lights. Elijah's hands flew across the controls as he scanned the alert. They found us, he said grimly. Not the patrol ship. Something worse. Mercenaries. Lyra swam to the front of her chamber, her skin pulsing with question marks of light. The trafficking syndicate must have hired them, Elijah explained. My cover is blown. They know who I am now. He pulled up the scanner display. 3 ships approached from different directions, cutting off escape routes. We can't outrun them, and we can't hide in the nebula again. They'll just wait us out. Elijah studied the star charts. There's a mining colony on Vospar, about 2 jumps from here. If we can reach it, we might find help or at least somewhere to hide. Lyra's skin flashed once in agreement. Elijah plotted the course and pushed the engines to maximum. The ship lurched forward, racing toward the first jump point, with the mercenary vessels in pursuit. Hold on, he shouted as he executed a series of evasive maneuvers. The ship shuddered as a glancing shot hit their rear shield. They'd barely made it through the first jump point. The second jump wasn't far, but the mercenaries were closing in fast. We're not going to make it, Elijah muttered, watching the distance shrink between them and their pursuers. Lyra's skin suddenly glowed with an intense pattern. She pointed urgently at a small asteroid field they were approaching. You want me to go through there? Elijah asked incredulously. That's suicide. Lyra flashed once, emphatically. She pointed to herself, then to the navigation controls. Elijah hesitated only briefly. All right. I trust you. He wheeled her chamber closer and connected a direct input terminal that she could touch. Lyra placed her webbed hands on the panel, and her natural sensitivity to currents and pressure translated to navigational instincts. Her skin glowed with guidance patterns. Elijah released manual control, letting Lyra direct their path. The ship dove into the asteroid field, weaving between massive rocks that tumbled through space. The mercenary ships hesitated at the edge. Then 2 followed while one circled around to cut them off at the exit. Lyra's guidance was uncanny. Where Elijah would have seen only danger, she sensed subtle gravitational currents between the asteroids, finding safe passages invisible to instruments. The ship slipped through impossibly narrow gaps, skimming past spinning rocks with mere meters to spare. That's incredible, Elijah whispered as they emerged from the asteroid field unscathed. Behind them, explosions flared as one of the mercenary ships miscalculated and collided with an asteroid. The second pursuer pulled back, unwilling to risk the same fate. They reached Vospar, with the third mercenary ship still in pursuit. The mining colony came into view, a sprawling complex carved into the planet's rocky surface. We can't lead them directly to the colony, Elijah said. Too many innocent people. He directed the ship toward a series of deep canyons south of the main settlement. Their pursuer followed, firing whenever they had a clear shot. A blast struck their engine housing, and alarms blared throughout the ship. We're losing power. Elijah fought the controls as they descended rapidly toward the planet's surface. This is going to be a rough landing. The ship scraped along the canyon wall before slamming into the dusty ground. Elijah was thrown from his seat while Lyra's chamber cracked, water spilling across the floor. The mercenary ship circled overhead, searching for a landing spot. Lyra. Elijah crawled across the tilted floor to her damaged chamber. Are you hurt? She flashed twice for no, but her skin was drying quickly. Without water, she wouldn't survive long in Vaspar's arid climate. Elijah grabbed an emergency pack and a water container. We need to move before they find us. He helped Lyra from the damaged chamber, supporting her as they stumbled from the wreckage. Her legs, rarely used in her aquatic home, struggled to carry her weight. Elijah poured water over her skin as they moved, keeping her from drying out. They found shelter in a narrow cave as darkness fell. The mercenary ship's searchlights swept the canyon repeatedly. They're persistent, Elijah said, checking his blaster's charge. Professional bounty hunters, by the look of their ship. Lyra sat with her back against the cool stone, her skin barely glowing now to conserve energy. She motioned for Elijah to come closer and placed her hand on his temple, her eyes closed in concentration. Elijah felt a strange sensation, like cool water flowing through his mind. Images formed. 3 armed figures approaching their position from different directions, using the darkness for cover. "You can sense them," he whispered in amazement. Lyra flashed once, weakly. Her empathic abilities extended beyond emotions to physical presence, especially when creatures were focused on hunting. "That's an incredible advantage," Elijah said. "Can you keep tracking them?" Another single flash. Elijah nodded and checked his weapons. "All right, here's the plan. Instead of waiting for them to find us, we're going to hunt the hunters." Using Lyra's sensory guidance, Elijah moved silently through the darkness. The first mercenary never saw him coming. A quick blow rendered the Zarvian unconscious. Elijah took his weapon and communicator before moving to the next target. The second hunter was more alert, but Lyra's warning gave Elijah enough time to dodge the alien's shot and return fire. The mercenary fell with a stunned groan. The third hunter, realizing something was wrong, retreated toward their ship. Elijah and Lyra followed cautiously. As they watched from cover, the mercenary entered emergency launch procedures. "If they leave, they'll just bring back more hunters," Elijah said. Lyra touched his arm, her skin pulsing with a plan. She pointed to herself, then to the ship, making a disruption motion with her hands. "You can disable it." One flash. With Elijah providing cover, they approached the ship. Lyra placed her hands on the external access panel, her natural bioelectricity interfering with the ship's systems. Lights flickered and died as critical systems failed. The mercenary emerged, weapon drawn. Elijah was ready, firing first and dropping their final pursuer. "That was incredible," Elijah said as they secured the unconscious hunters. "How did you do that?" Lyra's skin rippled with patterns that seemed almost like a shrug, followed by more complex lights that Elijah couldn't fully interpret. "Whatever it was, you saved us again." He looked toward the mining colony lights visible in the distance. "We should reach the settlement by morning. Maybe there we can find a way to contact Earth intelligence without being detected." As they prepared to rest before the journey, Elijah noticed how Lyra watched him. There was something new in her gaze, not just trust, but something deeper, a connection forming between two beings from vastly different worlds, united by survival and growing respect. The mining colony of Vaspar welcomed few visitors, making Elijah and Lyra's arrival the subject of immediate curiosity. Elijah crafted a simple cover story. They were researchers whose ship had crashed after a navigation error. The colony's administrator, a gruff woman named Marta, seemed suspicious but offered them shelter in an unused storage building. "Don't cause trouble," she warned. "We have enough problems without offworlders bringing more." Once alone, Elijah secured their temporary shelter while Lyra rested in a makeshift pool they'd created from storage containers and filtered water. Her skin had regained some of its vibrant blue, but she still appeared weakened from their ordeal. "I need to access the colony's communication system," Elijah said, checking his portable scanner for surveillance devices. "If I can send an encrypted message to Earth intelligence, they might extract us before the traffickers find us again." Lyra's skin pulsed with doubt. She made a series of gestures they had developed for communication, suggesting caution. "You think we're still in danger here?" Elijah asked. One flash for yes. "From who?" "The mercenaries are contained, and this colony is off the main trade routes." Lyra's pattern of lights became complex, frustrated by the limitations of their communication system. Finally, she pointed to her own chest, then made a circular motion encompassing her entire body. "Something about you." Elijah frowned, trying to understand. "The traffickers want you specifically, not just as a slave." One bright flash. "But why? What makes you so valuable to them?" Lyra hesitated, then slowly raised her hand from the water. A small cut on her palm from their crash landing was completely healed, not even a scar remained. She pointed to the healing skin, then to Elijah's forehead, where his wound from days earlier was still visible. "You heal quickly," Elijah noted. "Is that common for your species?" Two flashes for no. Realization dawned on Elijah's face. They're not after you as a slave. They want something in your biology. Lyra nodded and made a drinking motion. A compound in your blood. Elijah's mind raced. Something that accelerates healing. One flash, followed by a gesture toward her head and a series of light patterns suggesting more complexity. It affects the mind too. Memory. Aging. Elijah guessed. Lyra's skin flashed once, brightly. An anti-aging compound, Elijah whispered. That would be worth billions on the black market. The door to their shelter suddenly slid open. Both turned, startled, as a young colony worker entered carrying supplies. Administrator sent these, the worker said, setting down containers of food and water. His eyes lingered curiously on Lyra before he left. We need to be careful, Elijah said once they were alone again. If word spreads about what you are. He moved to a small terminal in the corner of the room and connected his encrypted device. After several minutes of bypassing security protocols, he gained access to the colony's communication system. Something's not right, he muttered, scanning through recent transmissions. There's an unusual amount of encrypted traffic for a mining colony, and these security protocols are military grade. Lyra swam to the edge of her makeshift pool, her expression concerned. Elijah continued digging through the system. Wait, these are Earth intelligence protocols, but they're not coming from headquarters. He looked up, troubled. Someone else from my organization has been communicating with this colony. Lyra's skin darkened with alarm. I need to know what's in those messages. Elijah's fingers flew across the terminal, using access codes that only high-ranking intelligence officers possessed. The files began to decrypt, revealing a shocking truth. No, he whispered as he read. This can't be right. The documents detailed a collaboration between certain Earth intelligence officials and the trafficking syndicate. Earth was secretly allowing the traffickers to operate in exchange for exclusive access to biological compounds from various species, including the longevity compound from Satyrians. My own people are involved in this, Elijah said, his voice hollow. The mission I was sent on wasn't to stop trafficking. It was to identify competitors and eliminate them. Lyra watched him, her empathic ability sensing his profound shock and betrayal. I've been working for them for 10 years, he continued, scrolling through more files. I thought I was protecting people, stopping criminals, but I was just clearing the way for the approved criminals. A new document appeared on the screen, a recent transmission ordering the capture of a human agent who had gone rogue after purchasing a Satyrian at auction. They're hunting us both now, Elijah said grimly. Lyra's skin flashed with an urgent pattern. She pointed toward the door, her body tensing. Someone's coming. Elijah quickly disconnected his device and moved to the window. In the distance, a transport ship was landing at the colony's main platform, a ship with Earth intelligence markings. We need to leave now, he said, grabbing their few supplies. Lyra emerged from the pool, water cascading from her body. She gestured to the terminal, then to her head, making a storing motion. You're right. We need evidence. Elijah quickly downloaded the files onto his device. If we can get this to the Galactic Council and honest officials on Earth simultaneously, we might expose the whole operation. They slipped out through a rear exit just as colony security began moving toward their shelter. Staying in the shadows between buildings, they made their way toward the maintenance hangars where smaller vessels were kept. There, Elijah pointed to a service shuttle. It's not much, but it might get us to the next system. As they approached the hangar, Lyra suddenly grabbed his arm, pulling him behind a stack of crates. Seconds later, 2 armed guards walked past, scanning the area with thermal detectors. When the guards moved on, Elijah turned to Lyra in amazement. How did you know they were coming? They weren't making any noise. Lyra touched her temple, then pointed to his. You sensed their thoughts? Elijah asked, eyes widening. One flash, followed by a qualifying pattern suggesting it wasn't exactly thought reading, but something close. You're full of surprises, Elijah said with newfound respect. They reached the shuttle and quickly overrode the simple security locks. As Elijah prepared for launch, Lyra sat beside him in the co-pilot seat, her skin glowing with determination. The nearest Galactic Council outpost is in the Arcturian system, Elijah said as the engines hummed to life. If we can reach it, we might find people we can trust with this information. The shuttle lifted off, keeping low to avoid detection. As they cleared the colony's perimeter, Lyra's hand unexpectedly moved to cover Elijah's. Her skin glowed with a pattern he hadn't seen before, warmer, with pulses of deep purple among the blues. Elijah understood the meaning without translation. In the midst of danger and betrayal, something unexpected had grown between them, a bond that transcended their different worlds and biologies. We'll figure this out together, he promised as they accelerated toward the stars, the evidence that could reshape galactic politics secure in their possession, and a new, unspoken feeling binding them on their dangerous journey. The Arcturian system remained 3 days away, even at maximum speed. Elijah and Lyra took turns monitoring for pursuit, eating little and sleeping less. During quiet moments, they refined their communication system. Lyra could now form more complex ideas through combinations of light patterns and hand gestures, while Elijah learned to read subtle variations in her bioluminescence. On the second day, Elijah spotted a transmission being broadcast across all emergency frequencies. He tuned in, and a cold feeling spread through his chest as he listened. They're blaming us for an attack on the mining colony, he told Lyra. They're saying we killed 3 workers and stole classified materials. There's a bounty on both our heads now. Lyra's skin darkened with concern. We can't go to the Arcturian outpost anymore, Elijah realized. They'll be watching for us there. He studied the star charts, searching for options. There's only one place left to go, the source of the corruption. Earth Intelligence Headquarters. Lyra's skin flashed twice in alarm. I know it's dangerous, Elijah agreed. But if we can upload the evidence directly to their public and secure networks simultaneously, it would reach too many people to cover up. He pointed to a small planet on the display. There's a major communications relay station here. With enough power, we could broadcast to both Earth and the Galactic Council at once. Lyra considered this, then flashed once for agreement. They altered course toward the relay station, an automated facility orbiting a gas giant called Hyperion. As they approached, they detected minimal security, just automated systems and a small maintenance crew. We won't have much time, Elijah said as they prepared to dock. Once we connect to the main system, alarms will trigger. We'll have minutes at most before security forces arrive. Lyra touched his arm, her skin forming a pattern they had established to mean together. They docked at a maintenance port and quickly cut through the security locks. Inside, the station was a maze of transmission equipment and power conduits. They moved silently through the corridors until they reached the central control room. This is it, Elijah said, connecting his device to the main console. I'll set up the transmission package. Can you monitor the security feeds? Lyra positioned herself at a secondary terminal, her hands hovering over the controls. Her natural sensitivity to electronic fields allowed her to sense changes in the system without fully understanding the technology. Elijah worked quickly, preparing the evidence files for broadcast. Almost ready, he muttered. Just need to bypass the final security protocols. Suddenly, Lyra's skin flashed with urgent warning patterns. She pointed to a security feed showing the ship approaching, an Earth intelligence cruiser. They found us faster than I expected, Elijah said, working more rapidly. Must have predicted our move. The station's alarms began to sound as the cruiser initiated a forced docking procedure. Elijah's fingers flew across the controls, racing against time. It's ready, he finally said. One command and everything broadcasts. But I need to stay here to ensure it completes. The system might try to shut it down. Lyra made a series of gestures, indicating she would delay the approaching security team. No, Elijah protested. It's too dangerous. They're armed and won't hesitate to shoot. Lyra's skin glowed with determination. She touched his face gently, then moved toward the door. "Wait," Elijah called. Their eyes met across the room, 1,000 unspoken words passing between them. "Be careful." She flashed once and disappeared into the corridor. Elijah turned back to the console and initiated the broadcast. Status bars appeared, showing the transmission progress. 5%, 10%, 15%, moving too slowly. In the corridor, Lyra found a junction box and placed her hands on it. Her natural bioelectricity interfered with the station's systems, causing lights to flicker and doors to seal randomly. The approaching security team found themselves trapped between sealed bulkheads. Back in the control room, Elijah watched the progress. 40%, 50%, 60%. The transmission was working, sending the evidence to thousands of receivers across Earth and Galactic Council space. A loud explosion echoed through the station. The security team had blown through a sealed door. Lyra retreated toward the control room, using her abilities to create diversions, but they were closing in. 75%, 80%, 85%. The control room door slid open. Lyra rushed in, her skin pulsing with warning. Seconds later, armed agents appeared at the far end of the corridor. "Get down," Elijah shouted as energy blasts shot through the doorway. One struck the console beside him, sending sparks flying. Another hit his shoulder, spinning him to the floor. 90%, 95%. The agents pushed forward, entering the control room with weapons raised. Lyra stood protectively over Elijah's fallen form. "Step away from the human," ordered the lead agent, aiming at Lyra's chest. Instead, she knelt beside Elijah, whose shoulder was badly burned. Her skin began to glow with an intense blue light. She placed her hands on his wound. The agents hesitated, confused by the display. A cool sensation flowed through Elijah's body as Lyra's hands transferred something into his wounded tissue. The pain receded, and he felt new strength flowing into him. 100%. Complete. "Transmission successful," announced the computer. The lead agent's face contorted with fury. "You have no idea what you've done," he snarled, raising his weapon again. "Actually, we do," Elijah said, standing with Lyra's help. "We've just exposed a conspiracy that goes all the way to the top of Earth intelligence and the trafficking syndicates." A new alarm sounded, different from the security alert. "That's a priority override," the agent said, touching his communicator. His expression changed to shock as he listened. "Stand down," he finally ordered his team. "What's happening?" Elijah asked. "Your transmission. It reached Earth Central Command. The Director of Intelligence and 3 section chiefs have just been arrested. We're being ordered to take you into protective custody." 3 months later, Elijah stood at the observation window of an Earth diplomatic vessel approaching Aqualis, Lyra's homeworld. She stood beside him, her skin glowing with excitement at seeing her ocean home again. "The Galactic Council's new anti-trafficking laws take effect next week," Elijah said. "They're naming it the Satyrian Protection Act." Lyra's skin rippled with modest embarrassment. "You deserve the recognition," he insisted. "Your people's compound isn't being harvested anymore. It's being studied properly, with full consent and compensation." She touched his healed shoulder, her skin forming the pattern they now both recognized as affection. "I've been officially appointed as Earth's first ambassador to Aqualis," Elijah continued. "If you're willing, they've approved a position for you as cultural liaison." Lyra's skin glowed with joy as she formed her reply, a complex pattern that Elijah had learned meant together. As the ship descended toward the vast oceans of Aqualis, Elijah took her hand. They had begun as captor and captive, become allies in survival, and now stood as something more, a bridge between worlds that had nearly been destroyed by greed and corruption. Together, Elijah agreed, as the blue world welcomed them home.